Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more episode of the Athletic School. Today, our guest speaker, she's a Stanford graduate in psychology. Mackenzie Price is the co-founder of 2 Hour Learning and Alpha School, where students spend only 2 hours on academics, which sounds pretty good to me. Mackenzie, thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Tell me a little bit more about how you came up with that idea um, of 2 hour learning. Is the system? I always thought that the system of education was broken. Do you think it's broken?
Unfortunately, I do believe it's broken. It's an outdated system that at one point in time, way back when the Industrial Revolution started, it made sense. It was raising compliant workers who would get some knowledge into them and then go out and be, industrious workers. However, things haven't really changed in many, many years. And what's happened is we've created this system that really zaps out the curiosity and intellectual vitality of kids. It does do a good job of creating kids who are either figure out how to be good at playing the school game, right? Like, okay, I know what hoops I need to jump through. I know what I need to get done in order to get an A in the class. Or more often than not, it creates bored and checked out kids who say, I don't understand that. And for me, I was a very successful student. I was really good at playing the school game, but I never enjoyed school. I really didn't like school. And again, I was like a really successful student when you think about it. But I hated school. In fact, when I graduated college, I remember literally tapping the top of my head and saying, I am never walking into a school building again. And now, years later, here I am running schools. So I'm in schools all the time. What a funny world it is that would be the case. But anyways, when my daughters started school, we were sending them to the traditional school that was in our neighborhood. And just really quickly, I started realizing that there was such a lack of ability to adapt to whatever my kids' needs were, right? And within a couple years, my daughter was bored in school, and they had taken a kid that was just like tailor-made to be a great student and just sucked away that energy. So I knew I needed to do something different. And because for me, it's not about private versus public school. It was about, we need to find a new model of education. There just wasn't really anything in my area that was going to hit that goal that I had. And so we decided, a group of us got together and we decided to start a school. And we knew right away that we were going to use adaptive apps in order to teach, because that's what enables kids to really be able to go at their own pace and their own level, so that you could have, two third graders sitting in a room together. One of them could be working 4 grade levels ahead. One of them could be working a grade level behind because that's what they needed. And of course, it could depend on the subject. And what we found over that time is that you really don't need 6 hours a day of sitting in academic classes in order to crush your academics. You can do it in a much shorter period of time. And so then the big question is, and what we found is, parents do not want their kids sent home after 2 hours, right? So instead, what are those afternoons going to be spent doing? And we realize the magic there is that because there are 2 things required to create a great learner. Number one, you have to be putting them in the right level and pace of academics, which is what ed tech is really good at. But even more importantly, you have to have a motivated student. If a kid is not motivated and excited to learn, they are going to check out. And so the best gift that we can give them is time to go do the things they love. And so depending on what school we're looking at, we do our 2-hour learning in the morning. Our kids learn twice as fast, minimum, basically, as kids in standard school. And then afternoons are freed up to go develop life skills. And so we have that at Alpha School, where we do general life skills workshops. We are launching our first sports academy, where we're going to be doing afternoon PE, athletics, general, just get outside and be active, and then several other things. I mean, literally, you could just take any interest that a kid could have and say, hey, let's plug that in the afternoon. And there are so many great ways to learn life skills. You know that sports is incredible for developing life skills.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's easier motivator as well, right? I think there's a clear motivation there. It's hard to be motivated to learn math, right? So, but I mean, there's a lot of questions about 2 hour learning but I
Mhm.
want to understand how the program works. I know you guys use AI. You mentioned that it's in the morning, but how is it possible that we only study for 2 hours, not six? And I know that some of the students that are even grading having better grades than the usual
Yeah.
student, just that have 6 hours a day of academics.
Yeah. Well, again, the key really comes down to the fact that you provide each and every student with exactly the level of information that they need to understand at the pace that they need to. And that's where, EdTech really does a great job of that. So we take students that come into our school, we don't care what level they come in at. So unlike a lot of private schools that say, oh, we're only taking kids who have great grades or score high on their tests or anything, we don't care where a student comes in, because we know that we can basically provide this one-to-one tutor in the form of technology in order to understand a few things. So first of all, what does a child know and what don't they know? What is the curriculum that we're trying to teach them? And then we can also add what are their interests in order to make this subject kind of come alive for them. So our 2-hour learning program consists of a few things. One is we use adaptive apps that are third-party apps that are available to anybody. Apps like Khan Academy, IXL, Alex, Grammarly, Newsella, all kinds of different apps that are out there. But what we found is not all apps are great at every subject or at every level. So part of the expertise that we have brought to the table is I've had 10 years of experience with trying different apps and understanding, okay, teaching first to fourth grade math, this app is really good at. But as soon as you started getting into more advanced math, you need to move to a different app. And once you're getting into high school math, you need to move to another app, right? Or, what's best for helping kids read. So we basically have figured out which apps are great. There are a few apps that we have built ourselves. And really those apps are mostly focused on younger students, our kindergarten, first, second graders. That's where we saw that there was kind of a hole in the market, particularly around math and learning to read. We've done that. But the other thing we found is you can't just hand a kid an iPad and give them an app and say, hey, let me know when you've graduated high school. Like, I'll be back on this. Kids are going to do what we call anti-patterns, which means they may not engage with the app in a really efficient way. They could do things like topic shop. They look on an app and they say, oh, I'm gonna play here. Oh, never mind. I'm actually going over here. Or as questions start getting harder and harder, they say, oh, I'm going to bail out of that. And so what we've done is we've created an AI tutor to really kind of manage the student's experience so that it's very seamless and very clear how it guides the student through what they're learning. So when a student comes to our school every morning, we start out the day with what we call a limitless launch. Basically, think like Tony Robbins for kids. It's a chance for kids to come together, get excited about how they're going to spend their day at school. We have to remember, school is kids' career for like 13 years. This is what they're going to go do 5 days a week, for the majority of the year. And we want them to be excited about their jobs. Their job is to learn. So we get them together. We help them figure out what are the goals they have for the day? What do they want to do? We also use that opportunity to teach some growth mindset principles. Like, hey, maybe you've got some challenges you're working on. Let's think about what are some of those growth mindset principles that you're going to have and take with you as you go forward today. Then we sit down and start our 2-hour learning block. And what we do is we basically do 25-minute Pomodoro sessions where students will start with math. They'll do reading, they'll do language, they'll do social studies, they'll do science. Of course, it depends on the age. Our younger learners are focusing on math and reading, and our high school students are taking AP curriculum, whatever that is. But they're doing that in short bursts of focused time, and then they get breaks. And here's the thing, it turns out it really doesn't take that long to be able to learn what you need from an academic perspective, especially, again, when you're getting the information at the pace that you need to have that go. And so that's why our results are really good. We do something called map testing 3 times a year. And it's a phenomenally great adaptive standardized testing platform that's taken by millions of students across the country in both public, private, homeschool settings. And, we just got our results in January, and we saw that our students are learning 2.6 times faster than the rest of the country is and scoring in like the 98th, 99th percentile. at some of our campuses. And, the top 2/3 of our students are learning 3.6 times faster, and the top 20% of our students are able to learn 6 times faster, which is just crazy, right? When you can think of it. And so, that works. You don't need the whole day to do that. And so after the kids wrap up their 2-hour learning session, they have lunch, and then they get to go jump into the afternoon life skills development.
That's awesome. It's almost like I want to go back to school and and do it again.
You know what? It does make school more fun. And that's one of the commitments that we have is we always say kids should love school, and they shouldn't love school just because every day is Disneyland. Part of loving something, and you think about this from a sports perspective, training for sports, playing games of sports, any of that, it's not all just easy, right? There's a lot of rigor that goes into it, but you can love it, right? So our students, even on a day when they've been challenged, they're still able to say, wow, this is really an exciting, day for me. And especially when we incorporate these growth mindset principles and help kids understand that they have the ability to do great, and working hard can pay off.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit more about the learning experience, right? I think so. Two things for me. It's like we're using apps, we're using technology, and I think we must use technology since kids are already using technology all the time. But I feel like there's also a lot of information out there, right? So how does that work in terms of not overwhelming the kid? Which it makes sense that they're only using for 2 hours, right? But how to make sure that they are not using too much in 2 hours, in order to kind of reach that level of 6 hours a day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, we're teaching them curriculum that is what U.S. students are being taught in a normal school environment. We're going off of U.S. Common Core, and so there's curriculum that you have to do as part of second grade math, third grade math. You're doing that, and our AI tutor kind of guides these students. Now we have some students who are able to go through many lessons quickly. In fact, we have students who will go up 1 or 2 grade levels in, a 4-month period. You can work really fast and do that. And so part of the reason that we put this at 2 hours is because our goal isn't that, we have to have kids graduate high school by the time they're in 8th grade, right? Mm-hmm. We want them to have time to go do those other things and be kids. So they're learning that curriculum. But another thing that we find that's really interesting is, our current school system is not mastery based. It's time based. Sit here, learn math for a certain amount of time per day, per week, per year. And then at the end of the year, you move on to the next grade, whether you know it or not. One of the things we often find is that kids will come to us and they may not have a solid understanding of material from the past, right? And so a lot of times what we're doing is we'll take kids who come in behind grade level, or even kids who have generally been doing pretty well. However, there's certain concepts that they need to go revisit and get refreshed on. Igor, did you like math growing up?
Not really.
No. Well, let me give you a little reasoning, and I'm curious if you think this is accurate or not. What we often see is that kids will fall off what we call a math cliff at some point, where suddenly they go, oh, I don't like math. I'm not good at math. I don't understand it. It's terrible. Right. And usually what happens is when we don't understand something, we don't like it, right? So if you're being taught something and then you're like, I don't understand it, and you keep going, pretty soon you're like, I don't understand what's happening. For me, that happened in about 9th grade. For me, all of a sudden I started getting into more complex math, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't understand. Now, here's the reason, is because I didn't have that strong foundation. And I often think of knowledge in a subject like math is like a Jenga tower. Have you ever played the game Jenga? And you're building your tower, and it's one of those things where, in kindergarten, you put in a block because you're learning addition, and you put another block because you're learning subtraction, and pretty soon you're learning multiplication and division and fractions and algebra, and your Jenga tower starts getting really tall. But if there's certain concepts that you're not really clear about, that's like taking a piece of the Jenga tower out. And so by the time you teeter up there and you're learning algebra and pre-calculus and stuff, it's like you don't understand what's going on because you're missing a lot of those subjects. And what we find is that when we can help our students go in and fill those holes and those knowledge gaps, suddenly what they're learning is making more sense to them. And one of the biggest things that I believe, and I think this is true in academics, it's true in athletics, it's true in playing music, is that competence builds confidence. And so as you get better at something, you start saying, you know what? Turns out I know how to do this and I can do it. And I kind of like it. It's fun. And I truly believe every single child can have the ability to do well in their academics in K through 8, subjects. Maybe a kid is not going to go to MIT and become an astrophysicist, but they can totally crush 8th grade science.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. I remember as a kid, I was trying to understand math, right? And well, it just seemed impossible to me. So why should I try? Like I've been trying this whole time, but like it's not going anywhere. I don't get the right result. So you know what? Let me just kind of give up and just do the bare minimum.
Exactly.
So why do the first 2 hours of academics in the morning? Is there a reason behind that?
There is a reason behind it. First of all, that 2 hours of learning of academics, we're not trying to pretend it's like all fun and games, right? It is what we call 2 hours of productive struggle. It's like, hey, you got to focus. So you know what? Morning time is a great time to do that. But here's the other thing is that we're helping kids unlock their afternoons to go do these other exciting activities, right? And so when we say, okay, give us 2 hours in the morning of productive struggle, and then as you've been able to hit your goals and do that, that unlocks the ability for the afternoons to be filled with these really fun workshops or activities that we're doing. So, for instance, at our sports academy, our kids are able to go do their 2 hours of learning in the morning, and then they're able to go spend the afternoon outside doing physical things. And I mean, you were at one point a 7-year-old boy. I mean, can you imagine anything more fun than getting to go out and just, play soccer and football and basketball and, run around and just have a good time with your friends? Like that's the kind of thing we want. And actually, I think it's what parents want. Parents want their kids to be able to be active. They want them to learn life skills like leadership and communication and teamwork and creativity. And there's so much time to do that. And so that's kind of the promise that we make with 2 hour learning is, hey, kiddo, if you give us that 2 hours of productive struggle, then we'll give you the afternoons to go develop these skills and do it in a way that's really enjoyable.
And how to deal with the lack of focus, not only for kids, but sometimes even for ourselves, right? We all have a lot of information. We have our phones. We're trying to to study here, but then our phone goes off and then we're looking at their phone. I know that maybe they don't have those distractions while they are with you guys. But how to deal with that lack of focus, which I feel like for us is common, but for kids, it's just as common.
It's extremely common. And one of the things that we learn as adults is we start coming up with strategies for how we can kind of maintain focus. And that's part of what we teach kids early on. We're raising our students to become self-driven learners and to get clear. So if you walk into one of our kindergarten classrooms, for example, at the end of the day, the kids will sit in a circle and they'll receive basically their kind of sticker charts for what they accomplished that morning. And one of the things that we have our students do is they'll stand up when they get their sticker chart and they'll announce, hey, today I finished 3 out of 3 of my math goals for the day. And I think the life skill that got me there was focus, right? I was able to persevere when something got hard for me. I'll never forget, I was in a classroom a couple months ago and I happened to be there when this little boy got up and he said, today I only finished 1 of my 3 math goals. And the reason I didn't finish is I was getting distracted. And so I just wasn't paying as much attention. And tomorrow, what I'm going to do differently in order to not be distracted is I'm not going to sit next to my friend Gus. And, and I looked at that and I thought it was so cute because this little boy, he's 5 years old and he has got the ability now to think, what went wrong? You know what? Turns out when I sit with my buddy, we distract each other. And so tomorrow I'm going to go sit in a different spot so I can focus on my math. And that right there, in my opinion, is just magic. As a parent, That's what I want my kids to be able to learn, is those skills of being able to say, you know what, I don't work well when I'm in this environment. Let me switch that. And, I do that as an adult all the time. Sometimes it's like, oh, let me get my laptop and I'm just going to sit in bed while I work. And pretty soon I'm like this, or, watching TV. And so depending on the age of our students, like if you walk into our 2-hour learning session for our kindergartners and first graders, it's not really 2 hours. It's much shorter. And then sometimes they're doing really short bursts of attention. We have another student who's a little girl. She's a kindergartner. And, her attention span is sort of in that like 5 to 10 minute mark. But what her guide, and we haven't talked about this, but the adults who play the role in our school of guides, her guide has gotten to know her and understand kind of what makes her tick. And one of the things that her guide sat down with her and said was, hey, whenever you finish a unit, which is one of the mastery units that we have, when you finish that one unit, you and I are going to go have a 30-second Taylor Swift dance party in the corner. And for a 5-year-old girl to say, okay, I can take a few minutes to focus, and then I know that I get to go up with my guide and have a little dance party and listen to a Taylor Swift song. What a great example. Now, in that situation, what's happening is the guide is kind of helping the student, like, here's the carrot. Maybe it's only a 10-minute, from now carrot, but that's helping her develop that ability to focus and motivate. And over time, kids will develop that more kind of intrinsic ability to focus and motivate. But you're right, it is hard. One of the huge travesties that's going on in schools around the country today is you think about all the kids who have been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, and the answer that traditional school is generally giving is, you got to make these kids sit still. You have to make them sit still. And that's not the best way to work with those kids, right? And so what we found is we'll have kids come into our environment and they've started learning, like, here's how we can get focused, but maybe it doesn't look quite like I'm sitting in a desk and I'm being still, or there's a little bit more movement. You compare this to 6 hours of class where they're forced to sit still. However, their brains are checked out. And what we're finding with our 2-hour learning model is that kids are more engaged because they are receiving that one-to-one personalized learning at their pace. They're also able to read, listen, watch videos to learn the subjects, and be able to go back. And that is what makes this not just screen time. This is truly a one-to-one personalized learning experience.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the features from someone that has ADHD is to hyperfocus, right? So if we try to make them, I don't know, focus for 6 hours, they probably won't. But, for 25-minute blocks, that might work perfectly, right?
Yeah. Well, and, we'll have parents who will come into our schools and they'll say, my son has ADHD. He can't focus. It's really hard for him to sit down and do anything academic. And often I'll ask the question, well, does your son play video games? And they'll say, oh my gosh, yes, he can sit for hours and play video games, or he can sit for hours and watch football on the weekends. He sits for hours. And so it shows, like, yes, sometimes kids are able to focus on something. And so what we want to do is help channel that into something where we're able to really meet the kid where they need to be met. Provide that information to them at that right pace, and then give them the ability to kind of block their day out into ways where they work. We have another student who is easily distracted. He'll be working on his iPad, and then pretty soon you'll see him looking out the window, right? And do that. And so one of the things that our guides have worked with him on is he's really into bird watching, loves birds. And so our guide sat down and said, hey, let's do this. If you can give me, productive time where you're focused on this, we'll go out and we get to spend 15 minutes looking for birds. And they've created a chart of all the birds that are in our campus area and say, let's figure out if we can find all 10 of these birds, at some point through the year. And for him, that's enough to kind of say, hey, that's that focus I need. When I start getting distracted, it's like, okay, I get to go bird watching in 20 minutes. Let me focus on that. The same thing, we've launched Esports Academy, where we leverage kids' love of gaming and esports in order to create academic excellence. And when we first launched our pilot program in January, it was amazing. We took these, they were all boys. They happened to be all boys who had wanted to get into the program. And they were so excited about the idea of getting 45 minutes of video game time with their friends at school that all of a sudden they were like, you can't take me off of this. And their parents were shocked because they would say, hey, when he comes home, normally he wants to hop on his console and start playing. Instead, he was wanting to do schoolwork because he knew that was going to help him earn more time with his friends at school. And so when you think about that, like, a lot of people go, oh my gosh, I would never send my kids to a video game school. And it's like, well, if it suddenly delivers incredible academic results and your kid can't get enough of learning and they're socializing with their friends and learning life skills that they can learn through this, and suddenly the parents are like, actually, this is pretty cool. Let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. Do you think we can use a little bit of that motivator for ourselves as adults? Maybe we are studying something that we don't really enjoy as much. Do you think having that motivator that, like, okay, if I get this done, I can go, I don't know, eat some popcorn or something like that. Say popcorn because
Igor, I'm so embarrassed to say that you have discovered my unhealthy habit, which is I earn myself a Diet Dr. Pepper once a day if I've gotten my work done at a certain time of the day. I'm like, if I can get this and this and this stuff done, I get to go to the gas station and buy a Diet Dr. Pepper. So yes, we certainly have those things. And, there's a big debate that goes on in education, particularly around kids, of, extrinsic motivation models are bad, right? Kids should be intrinsically motivated. And you know what? That would be amazing if everybody was intrinsically motivated all the time. But that's not true. I mean, you and I get paid to go do our jobs. There's extrinsic motivation that we have, right there. And one of the things that we find successful is if we can give kids some feeling of like ownership in their culture and some sort of reward, that then of course leads to that competence in academics, that leads to confidence, that starts leading to an intrinsic motivation. And so in our school culture, we have all kinds of different things where kids we do a lot of competitions. We do team-based activities. We have an alpha currency at our alpha school, and we have this at other schools too, where they can earn currency for getting work done, and then they can trade it in to buy things at the Emporium or whatever. And that's a great way of kind of helping get kids motivated. But then, of course, as kids get older and they start getting more competent, that's when that light switch will usually happen of kids are like, I am motivated to crush whatever it is that I'm doing. And we've also given kids more time in their day to discover the things that they're passionate about and that intersection of their talents and their interests. And when you find that stuff that you're like, I love this, then suddenly it's really exciting, and kids kind of say, gosh, I can't wait to get to work. So, for me, like I wake up every morning and I love my job and I love the mission that I'm on. And so I'm excited to go, put in the work on these things. Now at about 3:00, I'm excited to have my Diet Dr. Pepper as well. But that's how I think we should think about with kids. And so, the way the motivation system is set up in traditional school now is we literally take a kid in kindergarten and we say, okay, here's your motivation model. You're going to go to school 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, 9 months a year for 13 years. You're going to grind it out. As you get older, you're also going to be doing homework at night, and you're going to be really busy. And if everything goes really, really, really well, you might get to go grind it out for 4 more years in college, right? If that all goes well. That's the motivation model that we currently give students. And, there's just so many better ways that we can get kids plugged into their interests, their passions, and their competencies.
Yeah, that's not a motivator at all. So,
No.
So you touch a little bit briefly about what they do after that 2 hour of learning in the morning. But what are some of the other activities that they do that maybe they're still learning something, right? Because they're not just going outside and playing; they're probably doing something else as well. So
They definitely are.
yeah,
Yeah,
the rest of the day.
let me give you an example of one of the workshops that we just finished this most recent session. This was for our middle school students. Our middle school students were taking a pottery class, and basically they were, learning all about the process of pottery making. They were spending time doing a bunch of different things. So it was a very active type of workshop where they're getting to express their creative side. They were encouraged to come up with things that related to certain time periods in history or whatever, right? All these things they kind of got to work on. And then at the end of this experience, when they had created their like final masterpiece, they had to destroy it. They had to destroy their own work and masterpiece. And these kids were like, wait a second, I've worked so hard to get good. I've had to start over multiple times. Now I've been created something and I have to destroy this myself. And it's like, gosh, that sounds kind of brutal. But what we're trying to help kids understand is like being able to deal with, disappointment, being able to take a new perspective when they're frustrated, instead of saying this sucks and this is terrible. It's like figure out a more resourceful attitude. And so what they did was they broke their pieces and then they had to come up with a new creation out of their broken pieces and do something. We did this over a period of 6 weeks. And so the kids learned a lot of skills, everything from how to make pottery to, creativity, to dealing with disappointment, to having a resourceful attitude, and that's kind of a harsh one, but it was kind of an exciting thing for the kids to do. Another project or workshop that we do that kids absolutely love is they will get in teams of 2 and they have to build a car that they then program. And so they have to learn to code in order to be a self-driving car. And so they are, of course, learning teamwork skills. They're learning coding skills. They're putting these cars together. So they're constructing and learning what that is. Then they're programming the cars to go around a replica of an F1 racetrack. And it is so fun to watch these kids communicate with each other and learn all of those skills. And what's really interesting is you can take something like coding that, there are sometimes kids who are like, I'm not really interested in coding. I don't want to code. But you add something else to it where it's like, oh, I see that my code is making this car go around this track. And suddenly you get kids just like, this is so awesome. And it's a great skill to have. So they're doing a lot of interesting things. We also make sure that we're always doing some physical type of workshop, and so one of our more recent sessions too was a whole thing around camping. And so they had to learn how to start a fire, from random objects. They had to cook meals. They had to do all those types of things. And there's a lot of life skills that you learn with that. We did another workshop with the goal of teaching communication, empathy, teamwork, and leadership. And we have something called a test to pass for each of these workshops, which basically says like, hey, can the kid actually show that they have learned these skills? And so our students got to go to an escape room where you're given a task of, you got to figure out how to escape this room. And there's, 8 people in a team, and we mic'd them up. And then we recorded what they said during this escape room experience, and we had AI judge it. They had to pass over 90% of intonation, empathy, and positive communication. And so the kids had done a lot of work throughout that session in order to learn like what does make a good team member? How do you communicate in a more positive way? And then they were evaluated at the end of that. And so they had a great time doing it. I'll give you one last example that I think is really interesting. Socialization is a life skill that, parents want kids to have. Everybody wants to have the ability to communicate well, to read an audience well, to do that. And so we had a spy workshop. But during the spy workshop, kids were learning things like how to look at body language, how to maintain eye contact, how to carry on a conversation in order to, find information, but do it in a way that's not pushy. And it was particularly interesting. We had a child who's autistic, and he came up to me one day at school, and he said, hi, Miss Mackenzie. And he shook his hand, took his hand and he shook my hand. And he said, how are you today? And I said, I'm wonderful. How are you doing? And he said, very well. I've been very busy with school this morning. And and what about you? And he's carrying this conversation with me, and it was really cute. And then at one point he looks at me and he says, do you notice how I'm maintaining eye contact? And I said, I absolutely noticed that. And I thought about it like, what a cool thing for a kid who struggles in this area. You know, and another example of that is, have you ever, Igor, been in those conversations where you're at a party and you're talking to someone and pretty soon you can tell they don't really want to be talking to you anymore. They're sort of like starting to do this. And, you know, sometimes it's like, hey, we need to recognize that and let that person go gracefully. And that's an example of something that we teach kids. Hey, when you're reading body language, if you start seeing that their heads are going this way or their feet are heading this way, instead of continuing and wondering what's going on, like, oh, here's a graceful way to exit a conversation, or maybe ask a question and see if the person could get interested in that again. Those are skills that we need to learn. In fact, I think a lot of adults should go through that workshop, you know, in order to learn socialization skills.
Oh, I'm sure. I love the idea. I love the concept. I just wish I could go back and do it all over again. I would definitely. It would save me a lot of time, a lot of trouble. But well, I have one last question for you, and I don't know if I send this to you or not. But it's a question that I'm always asking my guest speakers. It's, what's a message you would tell the world, right? Anything, maybe, I don't know. There's like something that is going to go on TV, or it's a quote, a phrase, or something that you would tell everyone. What would that be? Anything.
Well, you know, you asked me a great question because it's something I'm very well prepared for. And if you go to my website, 2hourlearning.com, you'll see it right there, which is my mission. And my mission is for parents to understand that their kids only need 2 hours a day to crush academics, not just to get by on academics, but to crush academics. And so I want parents to realize that they should expect more out of their kids' school day experience. I think a lot of times we all went through the school experience and we just kind of say, hey, it's just the way you have to go through school. School's, it's whatever it is, but you just got to go through it. It's a rite of passage. And I want parents to understand, no, school can be so much more. Kids are truly limitless. And if we give kids an environment where they can go and figure out how to like unlock that potential, that's hugely important. And the beauty of AI technology and our adaptive app learning framework is that, you know, AI doesn't care if you're rich or poor. It doesn't care if you're white or black or brown. It doesn't care if you're in the 10th percentile or the 90th percentile. It is infinitely patient. And it's a phenomenal way of being able to teach students. And so I want to see this program and this movement become scalable. Right now, the schools that I run are all operating as private schools. But we're working on getting charter status and virtual charter status. If we did that, then it would make tuition-free schools for students, which would be, you know, incredible. And I also believe that over time, as AI gets less expensive, the costs for doing this are going to go down. And I truly believe that AI technology will be the scalable solution for the world to be able to learn from. And I'm so excited about what the future holds, because I truly believe that it's time for education to be disrupted, and it's time for us to give our kids a really phenomenal education experience and help open up their life skill development.
How far are we from bringing the 2-hour learning to college? Is it a far away to go still?
You know, it's an interesting thing to think about with college. You know, I'm focused on the K through 12 landscape. College has still got a lot of tradition. However, one of the things that's interesting about college is, especially as you get into kind of higher levels of stuff where you're no longer having to worry about just cramming knowledge into a person's head, you're able to have more discussion. I still generally have a reasonably positive view on what college gives to a lot of people. A lot of ability to have critical thinking discussions and all of that. At the K through 12 level, I'm really focused on the idea that in order to raise great critical thinkers, you have to have knowledge in your brain to pull from. Right. And so that's why it's important, like, feed your brain as much information as you can. And then from there, communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, what I call the 4 C's, can really come out. So it'll be interesting to see. College is a whole different beast, and there's so much crazy stuff happening in the college world these days. I'm glad I'm not having to work at a college, but I do know that there is demand for this, and I think again, one of the biggest things I can see at the college level is when you get kids coming in to freshman year of college, they've all been prepared very differently. And I think adaptive apps would be a great way to make sure kids are, like have their math skills where they need to be, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mackenzie, thank you so much for all the information you gave us. Can't wait to see that growing, more people being able to access that. As I said, it's something that I wish I could go back, but maybe one day my kids can do that and not just go to school for 6 hours and not enjoy it, right?
I
I really
love that. I
appreciate.
think it's a great idea. Yeah. And, you can always go to 2hourlearning.com. We're about to launch a library of content, video content that gives people just ideas and inspiration for educators that are out there, for people who are interested in starting their own schools, for teachers that are trying to figure out ways that they can incorporate more of this into their classrooms. I would like for this idea to spread like wildfire, and hopefully it will.
Yes, hopefully it will. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.